Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to share my experience interviewing for the finance role for Infosys Limited, which I applied through an employer referral found through LinkedIn. I hope my journey and questions that I encounter will help you prepare for your own interview. So let's dive right in. First, a quick note on the application process. After the referral, I was asked to fill out my details on Infosys portal. Then after a few weeks, I received a confirmation email about being shortlisted. In that email, Infosys provided several job descriptions to review and asked me to pick one of three available dates for the interview, which was scheduled about a week later. My interview was conducted by two panelists and went on for an intense 45 minutes. Now I'll walk you through the questions they asked me and some valuable tips to keep in mind. As expected, we started with greetings. The panelists asked me to introduce myself and briefly walked them through my resume. So, tip number one, be completely thorough with everything on your resume because they asked me many questions directly from my resume to check my understanding of the assignments and experiences that were listed in my resume. Because being a fresher and interviewing for the finance role, that is what the very first thing that is expected out of you. Next, based on my resume, since I had some experience with GST, not some, but good experience with GST, the questions got pretty detailed here. So they asked me describe the GST refund that I have done during my articleship and which provisions of the act that the refund involve. Then there was a followed up question on this, like what is the inverted duty rate structure? Are there specific limits, conditions for refunds under this structure? What's the formula for calculating the refund amount? Then they asked me next questions like what is the term used for exports under GST? So the answer that was expected here was zero rated supplies. Then they asked me, are exports exempted or taxable but zero rated? So the answer being the latter here. Then they asked me, what are the two options available for exports in GST? So your answer should be zero rated supplies with and without payment of tax. Then they asked me if there are any documents required to make exports with or without payment of tax. So the keyword that was expected of the answer in the answer was LUT. They asked me about any recent news involving Infosys, particularly about a recent notice they received from GST department. Since I had read up on this, we had a small discussion about the case. They also asked me about some other popular GST case and whether I was aware about the same, and I politely said that I did not know about the same. So tip number 2, very important, always keep yourself updated on company news. It's common for interviewers to gauge your awareness of their recent activity. Then they asked whether I have read Infosys annual statement and financial statements. So tip number 3, familiarize yourself with companies' financial statements and key metrics, especially profit and loss statements, major expense heads, and revenue drivers. Know who the key leaders are, like the chairman, CEO, CFO, and other department heads. So based on this, they asked me what are the Infosys two largest expense categories and why. Then they asked me if there are any operating parameter relevant to an IT company that might affect revenue or margin. So in this segment, they kept cross questioning me on each point I that I had mentioned in my interview. One question they asked based on our discussion was if I recommend a higher pay for employees to boost productivity, then how should the company maintain or increase its margin in this case? A very nice question to ask. Then they asked me about my interest areas, reasons for it, and about my preparation for business finance domain since I was going to choose that. So tip number 4 is research the role thoroughly that you want to or you are applying for, as they may ask scenario based questions to assess your analytical skills and problem solving approach. Since this was my first interview, after becoming a CA. I honestly wasn't fully prepared for the next set of questions that I'm going to discuss in the video. However, I made sure to stay calm and composed. This is also a tip for you, choosing not to let any nervousness show on my face. So, staying positive helped me listen carefully to each of the questions, think quickly on my feet, and recall every possible information that I could as best I could give to my answers. So let's see what was asked to me. I mean, what scenario based questions were asked to me in my interview. Like, they presented a case study on business process about a telecom company. So they asked me questions like, as a customer, what would be my expectations? Then they came to the main question like, what business considerations should be addressed from both the customer and the company's perspective. Company as in the IT company or the Infosys over here. And then there was a followed up question on this like, what questions would I, as being employee or as being a CA who is in the finance team, would ask to the telecom company as part of the business finance team. So this was challenging, but they provided me some guidance on what answers they were expecting of me. So it was a very interesting interview for me, to be honest. So next, based on the subjects that I did marked as exemption on my resume, they asked several technical questions like, if a company is considering a buyback, should it fund it through a debt loan or internal sources? What is my suggestion on it and why? Then they asked me, if it is funded by debt, what impact does it have on the balance sheet and profit and loss statement of the company? Then there was again a follow up question that what does a buyback or how does a buyback affect the EPS? So you may answer whether it will increase or decrease and also take time to analyze the formula and answer calmly. Lastly, they asked me what is elasticity of demand and whether I have any questions for them. So at the end of the session, I was told that HR will get back to me. In the HR round, we discussed the compensation, role details, my domain preferences, location preference, workday policy, and the number of attempts allowed for exams. They consider inter and final together, maximum total 3 attempts altogether. So every interview is unique with the content depending on the interviewer, your resume, and your work experience. Your answers will often shape the direction of the conversation. The more videos and resources you explore about finance roles, the better prepared you will be for a wide range of questions. Remember, no interview guide can cover everything. Interviewers are becoming more creative with their questions, so it's important to stay adaptable and well prepared. If you found this video to be helpful, don't forget to share it with your friends who are preparing for the interview, and drop a comment if you found this information to be useful. Wishing you all the best for your interview. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more insights and tips.